After years of speculation, at 63, Jon Bon Jovi, the iconic frontman of Bon Jovi, is finally breaking his silence on the real reason behind Richie Sambora's sudden departure from the band. The truth is much more devastating than fans ever imagined. What really happened between these rock legends? Join us as we uncover shocking details that changes everything. Jon Bon Jovi's journey looks like the perfect rock and roll fairy tale. A kid from New Jersey with a big dream becomes the frontman of one of the most iconic bands in history. While other bands from the 80s burned out, collapsed under drama, or faded into nostalgia acts, Jon Bon Jovi kept climbing. Every tour, every album, every reinvention of sound. For him, Bon Jovi wasn't just a band, it was a mission. He once said, "We don't get to take breaks. The world doesn't wait." That philosophy powered the group through multiple decades, outlasting grunge, hip-hop takeovers, and digital disruption. He pushed through industry shifts and personal exhaustion. Every step forward was calculated. Every slip was patched before it could become a crack. That kind of control builds empires, but it can also fracture relationships. Jon wasn't just a frontman, he was also the manager, the leader, and in some ways the boss. And while that role earned him the respect of millions, it also created tension. The more successful they became, the heavier the expectations. It wasn't enough to be good. Jon demanded great. Behind the scenes, that pressure wore on everyone, including Richie Sambora. Friends from the early days described Jon as focused to the point of obsession. He didn't allow drama to derail progress. He didn't tolerate distractions. When personal problems crept in, Jon's instinct was to push forward, not pause. That unrelenting drive, while impressive, didn't leave much room for vulnerability. But as the years passed, even Jon couldn't outrun time. His voice began to strain, his body began to slow, and for the first time, he began to talk about it. For years, he'd stayed quiet about Sambora. But now, in his 60s, he wasn't afraid to reveal the truth. Not as an attack, but as a statement. The world had always seen Jon Bon Jovi as the guy who kept it all together. What they never realized was what it cost him to do that, and whom he lost along the way. If there's one thing Jon Bon Jovi mastered better than music, it's restraint. In an industry built on headlines and scandals, he became known for keeping his private life and professional drama locked behind closed doors. He wasn't the kind of frontman to storm off stage or blast someone in a tabloid, even when tensions boiled behind the scenes due to Richie Sambora's sudden departure. But Jon always stayed quiet. When Richie left the band in 2013, fans were stunned. There were no warnings, no public blow-ups, no official statements beyond a generic line about personal issues. For a band that had spent 30 years presenting a united front, the silence was devastating. Jon didn't lash out. He didn't slam Richie. He just kept going. To outsiders, it looked like damage control. But to longtime fans, it felt like something deeper. Like Jon was choosing professionalism over pain. He could have told the world what really happened and share his frustrations. Instead, he let the media speculate and focused on keeping the band alive. That kind of leadership earned Jon respect, but it also left questions hanging in the air. As the years passed, Jon kept that wall up. Whenever the topic of Richie came up, his responses were brief, careful, and distant. He referred to the band as a machine that had to keep moving. And to him, Richie had chosen to step off that machine. There was no war, no reconciliation, just absence. But beneath that quiet front, people close to the band saw the strain. Richie hadn't just been a guitarist. He was Jon's right hand for decades. Their harmonies were more than musical. They were emotional. They were partners in writing, performing, and surviving the chaos of fame. Losing Richie wasn't just a professional hit, it was personal. For years, he dodged it. Interviews would come and go, and Jon would offer the same generic responses. "We're moving forward. The band's doing great. We wish him well." He was asked again if he and Richie had stayed in touch. His response was critical. "We're not in contact because he's not in the organization anymore." He didn't say, "the band." He didn't say, "my friend." He used the word organization. Jon told the world everything they needed to know. This wasn't personal anymore. It was structural. It hit fans hard. For those who had grown up on Jon and Richie's brotherhood, two kids from Jersey taking on the world together, the phrase felt like a quiet betrayal. Not because it was wrong, but because it was honest. That line didn't come from anger. It came from acceptance. From a man who'd carried the weight of a brand, a friendship, and a legacy for decades, and finally decided to put it down. Fans dissected the quote online. Some defended Jon, others accused him of being cold. But almost everyone agreed on one thing. The man who'd built an empire on loyalty had just made it very clear. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. The message was simple. Richie was part of the past, and Jon has already moved on. When the Bon Jovi story dropped in early 2024, fans expected a nostalgic ride. But what they got was something no one was prepared for. Raw emotion, quiet pain, and a portrait of a man grappling with time, loss, and the price of holding everything together. The four-part docuseries wasn't just about the band's glory days. It was about Jon, his voice, his vulnerability, and his reality. For the first time, we saw him not as a rock god, but as a human being at a crossroads. His vocal cords had deteriorated so badly he could barely sing. Every scene of him struggling to hit notes or facing the possibility that his career might be over was gutting, and yet he let the cameras roll. That honesty made something else stand out even more: Richie Sambora's absence. Richie appeared in the series, but never beside Jon. Their interviews were recorded separately, edited to feel distant. Jon was present, active, still fighting. Richie was a ghost, popping up in voiceovers, archival clips, and one final heavily discussed moment. In the last episode, Richie offered something that fans had waited over a decade to hear: a genuine apology. He admitted he should have handled things differently, that walking away from the Because We Can tour was abrupt, that he could have done more to preserve the bond. For a moment, fans held their breath. Was this the beginning of a reunion arc? Not quite. It was subtle, but sharp. A reminder that while Richie's words might sound healing, they were still part of the show, still part of the narrative. Jon had heard the apology, but he wasn't buying into the redemption. The most telling detail? Jon showed deep emotion when talking about his vocal struggles, aging, and the fear of becoming irrelevant. But when Richie's name came up, that vulnerability vanished. His posture stiffened, his tone flattened. He didn't explode, he closed off. You could feel the history between them, the unspoken weight of years spent side by side. But more importantly, you could feel the finality. This wasn't a falling out waiting to be resolved. It was a chapter that Jon had already turned the page on. But it did something far more powerful. It exposed the quiet truth that even in one of the most legendary partnerships in rock history, sometimes the bond breaks. And not with a bang, but with silence, distance, and time. When Richie Sambora walked away from Bon Jovi in 2013, it wasn't with a press release or a grand farewell. There was no farewell tour, no backstage drama caught on camera, no raging public meltdown. One moment, he was there, on stage, in rehearsals, in interviews, and the next, he was gone. The more he talked in the years that followed, the clearer the picture became. He wasn't just walking away from a tour. He was crumbling under the weight of a life that no longer made sense to him. Decades of touring, the relentless machine, the unspoken pressure to be perfect night after night. Somewhere along the way, the music had stopped feeling joyful and started feeling like survival. Jon, for his part, never aired out Richie's struggles. Not publicly. He didn't dispute the family story, but he also didn't offer open arms. Richie's choice may have been personal, but it left the band exposed, scrambling mid-tour to adjust, covering guitar parts, reworking harmonies, filling in a gap that, truthfully, couldn't be filled. Richie's absence became more than physical. It became emotional. His voice, his presence, and his swagger had been part of the band's DNA. And while Jon could move forward, fans felt the loss deeply. For many, Richie was Bon Jovi as much as Jon was. The two were inseparable in the minds of millions, but clearly not anymore. In interviews years later, Richie expressed regret. He said he missed the music, missed the fans. Maybe he could have handled things better, but by then, the damage had been done. He'd become a ghost, still haunting the band's story, even when he wasn't on stage. And for Jon, that ghost seemed to linger, not in anger, but in disappointment. The kind that doesn't flare up and fade, but settles deep and stays. Richie left to save himself, but in doing so, he broke something that may never fully be repaired, a bond built on riffs and loyalty, shattered by silence and timing. In the years following his exit, Richie Sambora didn't vanish entirely. He made the rounds in interviews, appeared at charity events, even teased solo projects. But wherever he went, one question followed him: will you ever go back to Bon Jovi? At first, he sidestepped it. Then, gradually, his answers softened. He started speaking more openly, sometimes even emotionally, about the band he helped build. He admitted there was regret, that maybe he didn't handle the exit the right way, that there was more to the story than just being a dad. And when the Thank You Goodnight docuseries aired and his apology was broadcast for the world to see, fans thought this might be the beginning of something. But even as Jon kept his emotional distance, his public statements told a different story. In interviews throughout 2023 and 2024, he gave mixed signals. One moment, he'd say, "The door is always open." Next, he'd point out that Richie hadn't made a serious attempt to return. He'd praise Richie's talent in one breath and question his commitment in the next. To fans, it felt like whiplash. Were they being teased with the idea of a reunion, or was Jon quietly shutting it down? The truth likely lives somewhere in between. Jon isn't the kind of guy to let someone back in just because the crowd is chanting for it. To him, Bon Jovi is a machine, and machines only run if every part is dependable. Richie's track record in the final years of the band wasn't clean. Missed rehearsals, uneasy communication, emotional ups and downs that threatened the group's tight-knit, ultra-professional image. Jon might still care about Richie as a person, but when it comes to the band, sentimentality doesn't override structure. On the other side, Richie began leaning harder into the narrative. In early 2024, he made headlines by saying, "There's a demand for my return." He positioned himself as willing, even eager, to rejoin the band, if only the call would come, but it didn't. And that silence said more than any press quote ever could. It's not just about the music anymore. It's about trust, about reliability, about whether Jon believes Richie can still be part of the organization without risking another collapse. Fans want the fairy tale ending, the full circle moment. But Jon? He's not writing fiction. He's managing reality. And in that world, apologies don't equal reinstatement, because when something breaks once, it's never quite the same again, even if it looks whole from a distance. By early 2024, Richie Sambora wasn't just hinting at a return, he was actively calling for it. In multiple interviews, he said what many fans had been dying to hear. He missed the band, he missed the music, he missed Bon Jovi. Not just the name, but also the brotherhood and the shared purpose. He wasn't subtle about it either. He said there was a demand for him to come back. The fans were constantly asking him when the reunion would happen, but Richie's enthusiasm wasn't met with applause. It was met with silence, and that silence eventually turned into something even colder. At a high-profile appearance at SXSW, Jon Bon Jovi was asked, yet again, about the possibility of Richie rejoining the band. A decade of speculation had led to this moment. Fans were divided. Some clung to the idea that Jon was just being playful, brushing off the question to avoid drama. But others heard it for what it likely was, a quiet, cutting message. A jab cloaked in calmness. Jon wasn't interested in nostalgia. He was interested in forward motion. And Richie? He was still living in the past. There's a power in saying less, and Jon knows exactly how to use it. In that moment, it became crystal clear that the door wasn't just closed. It may have never been open in the first place. All the talk of the door's always open suddenly sounded like PR padding. Like Jon said, it was the polite thing to say. But when given the chance to welcome Richie back, even hypothetically, he chose to downplay it, minimize it. The dynamic between Jon and Richie isn't explosive. It's not dramatic in the way people expect rock breakups to be. But it is painful, like an old scar that no longer bleeds but still aches when touched. Richie is still out there, still hopeful, still making noise. But Jon? He's already made peace with the silence. He's rebuilt the band, restructured the machine, and buried the past under layers of work, reinvention, and distance. And if Richie's waiting on that invitation, he might be waiting forever. What do you think really happened between Jon and Richie? Was this just two legends drifting apart? Or is there more to the story that we'll never hear? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe for further updates.